Welcome. Oh, sorry, guys. Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. My name is Andy Dowling, and this is episode 136. Wow, who would have thought? Now, before we kick into this week's episode, do you have Spotify? If you do, you can search for the Antisocial Podcast playlist. That's right. The podcast itself isn't quite on Spotify yet. However, I do note that that is actually in the works, so hopefully we'll have some news soon. However, in the meantime, I have created a playlist that features music from all the musicians that have been on the podcast to date. So if you want to support some of these people further, get on over to Spotify and search for the Antisocial Podcast. Follow that playlist. I'll be continuously adding more music to that playlist as I get more musicians on the podcast in the weeks, months, and years to come. So go and check that out. And hopefully soon, the podcast itself will be on Spotify. So stay tuned. Watch this space. Now, speaking of musicians, music stuff, I play bass in the Australian metal band Lord. Who would have thought? Surprise, surprise. You can get on over to lord.net.au, check out our brand new website that Tim's put together. It's fantastic. It's got Spotify integrated links. It's got video clips. It's got all of our bio and history and all this historical stuff. There's links to our online store where you can buy our brand new hoodies, which are quite timely if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, and CDs and all sorts of merchandise. And we've got a new album coming out soon. So more news to come on that. But go over to lord.net.au. Check all of that out if you want to dabble and get a bit of a taste of what the band is all about. In addition to playing in a heavy metal band, I also host the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So if that's something of interest to you, you can go over to selfstarter.com.au, or you can search for Self-Starter in whatever you're listening through right now. Hopefully, it's there. For anybody that has been playing along, this week, I've actually put out episode 18 because it's a fortnightly podcast, and it's a special episode all about side hustles. Well, one side hustle in particular. It's about Twitch and video streaming. So if you're interested in earning a little bit of extra coin on the side, go and check out episode 18 of the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about Twitch. And I'm hoping to do some more side hustle episodes in the future as well. So go over to selfstarter.com.au. You can check out the latest episode 18. And thanks so much for everybody that's been supporting that podcast so far. This week's shout out. Now, if you're new to the podcast, each and every week I publicly thank somebody. I put it on public record. My thanks to somebody that supports me in a whole range of different ways. And it could be via andysocial.net or on Self-Starter or Lord or whatever it is. Anything that comes back to me means a hell of a lot. And it could be demonstrating a whole range of different ways. It could be leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, on Facebook. It could be buying merchandise via andysocial.net or lord.net.au. It could be shouting me a beer via paypal.me on my website. It could be a bit of social media love, tagging, retweeting, love hearting, all that sort of stuff. It could be just recommending the podcast to friends and family. It could be messages of encouragement, guest recommendations as well. So anything and everything, small and big, it all adds up and it helps me continue to push all of this stuff forward, and it just keeps me motivated and driven and gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling. So thank you so much to everyone that continuously supports me. So this week's shout out is for Roz Regan. Now, Roz put up a while back a post on her Facebook profile that was a bit of a call to action. It was this gushing post about how great this podcast is and encourage people to listen to the Antisocial Podcast. So for anybody that's listening or has discovered this podcast via Roz, welcome and thank you so much. And a massive thank you to Roz as well. And Roz has also sent through some messages to give me some suggestions for future episodes as well, some topics, and I'm intrigued and definitely will dig into some of that stuff further down the track as well. So I really appreciate your support, Roz, and the enthusiasm and just the positive vibes that you're sending my way. So thank you, and please, when you hear this, send me a message and I will flick you out some little goodies in the post as well, because we all like getting something in the post. Okay, this week's episode is with Simon Lewis, who's an international humanitarian lifeguard. Simon has been a lifeguard in Victoria for quite some time, and like many of us, a few years ago, he saw the really tragic story that hit world news about the young boy, Aylin Kurdi, who had drowned and was found washed up on a beach in Turkey. And Aylin was trying to seek asylum as a refugee with his family, and unfortunately lost his life. And like many of us, struck a chord and stirred up a lot of emotions. But the difference with Simon is that, well, he leveled up. He went next level. He just invested his life into applying a lot of the skills that he had built over the years in surf lifesaving, raised a lot of money and awareness. And as it stands now, a few years later, he's done multiple trips to Europe and has literally worked on the waters in the Mediterranean, saving people's lives. He is literally saving people's lives. And I don't know the exact tally to date, but my understanding is that he has saved close to 2,000 refugees in the Mediterranean, people that are seeking asylum from varying parts of Africa and Syria. And this is really dangerous waters. A lot of people lose their lives, and Simon is doing his part and lending his expertise to a bigger problem that we have. And this is a really interesting story. It is definitely a reality check for me because, I live in a pretty comfy part of the world, and I've had a pretty comfy upbringing. So I have not had any experience with any tragedy that even comes close to what these people go through, this level of adversity. And I discovered Lewis indirectly through the ASRC, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. And I believe they might have retweeted something on Twitter about Simon, and I thought, oh man, I've got to reach out to this guy and have a chat. He is incredibly interesting, and luckily Simon was keen to chat. But a couple of days before we did this interview, Simon was participating in the ASRC's yearly telethon fundraiser that was raising money for the resource centre, and they were able to, in 24 hours, raise about $816,000, and I think they were about $150,000 above their previous record. So an absolutely amazing effort. And if you want to learn more about the ASRC, you can go to asrc.org.au. But to make everything easy, I have put everything in the show notes over at andysocial.net, including links to everything about Simon and all of his stories, and just anything that you want to learn about some of the refugee crises that we're having all over the world. But there's even a lot of stuff close to home here in Australia as well. So enough of me. As always, everything's in the show notes over at andysocial.net, so go and check that out. But for now, please enjoy this really, really great chat with Simon Lewis. First things first, congratulations on the other night, hitting the 800,000 mark for the telethon fundraiser for the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like Con and his team do a wonderful job there, and when I got there, we were 600K, and then we got to 800. So, it was truly an amazing experience.
Well, I was just about to call you on the night, and I thought I'll go and have a quick sticky beak on your Twitter feed, just see what you're up to or what you've been sort of tweeting about. And then I thought, oh, geez, you're in the middle of a telethon. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm reading up, and I go, oh, okay, great. So I threw a few dollars into the mix, and then I just started watching it over the last couple of hours, and it just spiked right at the end. Everyone got involved, and then Con was retweeting like crazy, and everyone was jumping on the bandwagon. It was quite exciting just to see everyone sort of just coming together to try and meet that goal. It was really, really exciting.
It was one of those things that I having been part of it last year, and having seen the reaction, and having done the telethon, and having had that experience with seeing what the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre does, the amount of goodwill and love that came from them. And when Con and I did a video that got uploaded, I was able to give that human side of what it's like when I rescue refugees, because realistically I'm only like 10% of their whole journey, and but that 10% is either life or death.
Yeah, it's pretty critical, just to put it lightly. And one thing that you mentioned there, that human element, is something that I think is missing in a lot of the noise that's out there, and especially from me personally speaking, you sometimes get sucked into whatever's on TV or on the radio or on the newspaper, and there's a lot of there's a lot of political agenda behind a lot of stuff, and people get sucked into, stereotypes, and sometimes it's a generational thing as well, where it's changed and there's difference, and we're talking about things that are disconnected from us, and we lose that human touch, that human connection. And I think just looking at what you've been doing over the last several years, and just having a bit of a dig into a lot of that, I think you're filling in a gap there, which I think needs to be addressed. And I mean, you're doing it practically by getting out there, but I think you're telling a lot of people about that.
Well, the interesting thing about my story is that I never thought I would end up in humanitarian crises rescuing refugees. Like, I started as a pool lifeguard, training in a gym. And then that led me to going, oh, I'm a pool lifeguard. Why don't I be a beach lifeguard? And that beach lifeguard skills then learnt me to become a professional lifesaver lifeguard. And then that took me around the world. And I saw that image of Alan Kurdi and I said, well, I've got all these skills. And all I did was literally apply my skills to another location. And it's the same thing across the whole bronze medallion in the surf lifesaving community. If you're a bronze medallion at Sydney, you can come down and patrol in Victoria, because it's the same set of professional skills. And so when I saw that image of the drowned Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi, I went, well, why am I not there? And basically I made it happen, and I said, I'm going, and I landed on the ground in Lesbos, Greece. And, it was a wonderful gift that I was able to go there, and the public of Australia supported me with my GoFundMe page after I got the front cover of the Age newspaper and a story in the Sydney Morning Herald as well. And that was the catalyst which kind of turned my life around. And I still remember on the 2nd of January 2016 when the front cover went viral, and the $22,600 in donations, and I just the humanity and blown awayness of what the general public, despite our refugee policy, was able to do and contribute with me. And as we saw the other night with the 800K for the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, just the public, despite any policy or despite any kind of government agenda, they always share humanity. And we always, whether we're biased on one thing or biased on another, we all come together as Australians in times of need. And you see that across the region. You see it with tsunami relief, you see it with hurricane relief. But for sometimes the word refugee is a bit polarizing. However, that's just the circumstance at the moment.
That's it. I mean, the word gets interpreted in a whole range of different ways, and it doesn't help when it's publicized in particular lights. And for the average person that's sitting at home on a couch and just watching what's on TV and seeing the way that it's portrayed, sometimes it can be skewed, and an opinion may be formed based off that, but it's not a true reflection. And what a lot of the work that you've been doing and the way that you've been getting out there in the public eye a little bit, and referencing Con earlier as well. I mean, Con stuff, that's a whole different thing altogether, but he touches into this as well as a whole range of other humanitarian aspects, but it links in that human connection. So suddenly it snaps people out of whatever autopilot sort of desensitized opinions that they might have.
Well, that's the thing, I didn't realise that Con was a finalist for the Australian of the Year Victorian Local Hero category, the same category that I was a finalist for. And we kind of looked at each other and went, oh, we're on similar paths and we get nominated for similar things. But the whole reason why we do it has nothing to do with anything that we're similarly connected with. And the reason is that when we see a child that like we're seeing now with the whole Trump border with America, is that when you see a child and you see that desperation, through the education and through what you've been brought up with, that they are the last link in the chain. They have no idea what they're going, what their policy or reality of their parents is. They're just experiencing the world. And, for me, for example, when I was off the coast of Lesbos, when we had a mother try to hand me her baby in the middle of in the GNC, we couldn't accept the baby because the boat was still moving. And under international law, that was if I'd rescued that baby, I'd taken it from its mother, I would have been charged for people smuggling because the law is pretty clear. But when you're off the coast of Libya, the fact that they're in a rubber boat 50 kilometres out to sea, that is a standard search and rescue case where we can rescue all the babies and the children, and they know no different because they're just living their life. And so when you go through all this experiences that they've been through, then you kind of ask yourself, if you put yourselves in their shoes, what would your perception of the world be? What would your perception of Australia be? And we are so lucky that we are born and we live here, and our multiculturalism aspect of Australia allows us to go and contribute it in the world, whether you are a doctor with MSF, or you are a lifeguard with SOS Mediterranean, or a Proactive Open Arms. It's just a wonderful gift that our skills allow us to make a difference in the world.
I'll go off on one little quick tangent. Just sort of thinking about myself personally and my upbringing. I lived, 3/4 of my life in Queensland, and pretty sheltered and pretty comfortable upbringing, and had pretty much everything at my fingertips. Great family, nothing to complain about. And I moved to Sydney, 15 odd years ago, and a far more multicultural, and then meeting a lot of people from different backgrounds, and people that are first generation here, and coming from various parts of the world that have just had a completely different experience to what I've had growing up. And through that, you start to realize and appreciate what you do have. But when you don't have those experiences, and you don't get to connect with people, you don't appreciate what you do have, and you tend to form really odd opinions and perspectives of the world and other people. And there's a real sort of divide between you and where you are in the world versus everybody else. But that certainly helped me personally. So when a lot of the things that you speak about it strikes a chord with me, because I've sort of had a bit of that sort of development over the years. And I think the multicultural aspect of our country has provided so many benefits. Just on that alone, let alone everything else.
Well, the thing is that, when we grow up in our schooling, we learn about the First Fleet, we learn about Port Phillip, Captain Phillip, or whoever, Captain Cook, etc. And we learn about, how these people came on a boat and they settled, and the Aboriginals, and all the kind of the history that happened there. And yet, if it was a modern day take on it, could you imagine them coming in an oil tanker, rocking up to Sydney Harbour, jumping off, and then starting a new life? And yet that is our history. That's kind of, we came by a boat and we rocked up, and once we reached land, we settled and we made a life for ourselves. And yet, this whole boat people kind of discourse around, oh, you can't bring them here, they can't, and they're doing exactly the same thing, 100 something years later. It's just a bit contradictory. But, I understand our border security, I understand international law, and I understand why our government does what it does. And I've been privileged to know a bit more information behind the scenes. But it's one of those things that, multiculturalism, refugees, asylum seekers, whatever label you want to call these people, when you're in Melbourne, you go to the South Melbourne markets and you want a dim sim. You go to Footscray and you want a Footscray roll. You go to Lygon Street and you want a souvlaki. And that's the thing that with it being Refugee Week this week, that's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating that these people, even though they've been through a hard journey, even though that they've gone through different experiences, they value add. And if they don't value add, they show you what you should be like then. And very rarely do you get someone who's risked their life in the sea, or risked their life to go to freedom, that would absolutely not enjoy every single day that they have freedom.
There's a level of just appreciation for life that a lot of people probably don't get the chance to experience. And for somebody that's been in those life or death situations, or fleeing an area where they've got that choice, and I've certainly seen you mention this in a number of different things, for people to put themselves in such a dangerous situation that throws the odds potentially or more than likely against them, goes to show where they're coming from and the circumstances that they're fleeing from. So for them to be able to seek asylum and seek a new country, and somewhere that's completely free in comparison to where they've been from, the energy that comes from people like that have been through such adversity is incredible. And there's a lot to learn from people like that.
Well, it's a baptism of fire. They've had to really test their resilience. They've had to really be mentally strong. Like you can't imagine just walking out the door, just going, oh, I'll just go get some milk. Walking out the door, and then you look back, and then your house is bombed, and all you have is just literally your wallet, your phone, your set of keys, and nothing else exists. And what do you do? And the bombs are still coming. And you know, would you run to safety, or would you just go back into the bombs, or would you go back into the torture, or would you pay, you know, your way out of that situation? And the thing is that human beings in general, you know, we all have that flight or fight mechanism. And it's, you know, we've got lots of history and lots of research papers on it, and the superhuman strengths that you gain when you're flighting or fighting. And you know, I've seen mothers do amazing things for their children because they want their children to have a better life, because they know that, you know, this life that they're living right now is only temporary. And I've seen these aspects of humanity in people who have nothing. And, you know, even if they had one bread slice, they would share it 4 ways, even though they're all hungry and they haven't eaten for 3 days. But that's the thing, you know, we then have people living and experiencing that. And on the other aspect of it, we have people who are, you know, worth millions of dollars drinking Dom Perignon. But that's the uniqueness of our planet. And, you know, when you go to a humanitarian crisis, when you're actually on the ground, and as an aid worker or you know, as a lifeguard or head of mission in my case, you know, when I'm there, every morning you wake up with purpose. You know, as an aid worker, why you're contributing to this crisis. You know why you're there. And the sad reality is that it's a sheer numbers game. There's, you know, refugees or migration routes are like water trickling down a mountain. It's always going to find a way to the bottom. It's coming. It's going down the mountain. But when you're on that crisis, you know, when you're waking up with purpose, you're making the most of your day, and you're trying to help people. And, you know, when they say thank you, or when you actually give them assistance, you know, half the time they can't really verbalize the thank you because they're too distraught, or they're too at wit's end, you know, they're too traumatized. So they'll look and they'll stare you down with the eyes, and they'll pierce your eyes, and you both will lock eyes, and you nod, they nod, and you both verbally, telepathically know exactly what you're saying, even though it's not verbally. And that moment is just, you cannot describe how soul enriching that it is that you've actually contributed to that person. And for us as a lifesaver, you know, when we save a life, you know, we still get that reward, but you know, it's just that that's our job, you know. And when we're just doing our job, we don't really overthink it too much, because we know that there's a bigger journey ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask you that at one point as well, about, you know, even going right back to day dot, so to speak, with, you know, being a lifeguard in a pool versus going, you know, the local beaches, and then going and doing work overseas in a more extreme set of circumstances. How you manage a lot of these situations and scenarios where, I guess, you know, I don't know if I'm just like the average Joe would probably look at it and go, oh, geez, this is like, it's so incredibly overwhelming and stressful, and something that would take a certain type of person to be able to handle it. And I think I'm just having a guess here, but the scenario that you just mentioned about having that connection with people and looking each other in your eyes and sort of getting that sort of electricity, that energy, and feeling that connection with people would be something that sort of mitigates and helps you control everything else that you're dealing with.
Well, the reality is that on any beach in Australia, the red and yellow flags are up. They put the flags up to be the safest part of the beach. And the thing is that if someone was drowning in those yellow flags, or near the yellow flags, or anywhere on the beach, when the lifesaver, who is professionally trained, enters the water, all he does in his mind is he just has to go as hard and fast to rescue the victim. So that's all he has to do: hard and fast, rescue the victim, because the reality is the difference between the victim and the lifesaver is attitude. When I enter the water, I know that I have a team behind me that's going to come get me. Not the gun ho mentality. We do what's called pause, plan, and rescue. So we pause, we look at what we're going to do, we kind of map out what we're going to do in our heads, and we execute it, and we go and run in the water, or we pull the victim onto our boat, etc. But the thing is that format of entering the water, that format of putting ourselves into danger, is knowing that we have a team behind us. And that team mentality is what makes us the rescuer. And when people are in distress and they're drowning, they've got tunnel vision, because it's all about trying to prevent saving their life. They're too focused on that than actually staying calm, et cetera, when people are in rips, for example. But it's that team mentality. And I'm no different to any other professional lifeguard in the world. The only difference is that I've applied my skills into humanitarian crises. And the attitude that I have is that I've from when I was a pool lifeguard, I had a lot of rescues. I helped drown kids. I had skydivers fall out of the sky, and I conducted some major rescues. And I learnt that when it's chaos and crazy, I'm actually very calm. And it's actually I can think very fast, and I can decide on outcomes. So that ability to be calm in crisis allowed me to end up going to the top position of head of mission. So I was the first Australian head of mission on the central migration route off the coast of Libya, which is the deadliest migration route in the world. So as a lifesaver, I've been the boss of a rescue ship in a humanitarian crisis. So I can't really, career-wise, I can't really get any bigger than that. That was like, and to give you an idea of the complexity, I was an Australian leading a German ship with a Spanish rescue crew off the coast of Libya, controlled by the Italians, rescuing African refugees who speak French. So
what a melting pot.
You can imagine what that was like.
Yeah.
And I've gone through different NGOs. I was with the International Life Saving Association, which is based out of Huntington Beach in California, and I was on the ground in Lesbos. So I was an American organization on the ground to help Greek lifeguards on a Greek island to get people from Syria coming via Turkey. And some of the other humanitarian work was I went to Mexico and trained a set of lifeguards there as well with the Americans. So, it's this, you've got skills, you've got the ability, everyone can absolutely do this. And, I was on Centrelink. I was poor. I had no money when I'd lost, I'd kind of moved, I got injured. I kind of got back on kind of getting fit. And then I got myself fit, and then I got a job, and then I was being a lifeguard, and I was, earning minimal money. And as lifeguards, we say, poor in cash, but rich in life, because we have to, because we'd like to be rich in cash. But, but the thing is that when you go to these places, or when you put yourself in the water, it's a very controlled kind of set of circumstances. Even if it goes wrong, the phrase is that so others may live, and the American Coast Guard have that all on their branding, so others may live, and that's it. Because ultimately, you've got an ability to help someone, and there's no excuse not to.
A couple of, so many things to ask you off that, but one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and one of your traits that's helped you succeed and have the impact that you've had with so many different people, is that calm approach in critical situations. Do you think that's a DNA thing with you, or is that something that's developed over the years as you've had more scenarios and experience? Is it something like, does that come from anywhere in your past? Is it a parent thing, or an upbringing, or what? Yeah, what's the origins of it?
Well, my mother's a nurse, so she's an RN, and I know I get some humanity from her. And she's a really beautiful lady who's helped lots of people, and she manages 6 wards, and she helps people in aged care, and she gives dignity in death. So saying that we have is humanity in life and dignity in death, and it's that kind of thing. I don't. It's not a DNA thing. It's just resilience builds up over time. It's like you're running a marathon. You do 10. You start with 100 meters, then you get 10Ks, 20Ks, and you build up, and then eventually, you finish the marathon. But it's that building up. I've had experiences over the course of my life that have taught me who I am, and once you kind of know yourself, or you know some of what you want to be, that gives you direction to go forward. I started off in marketing and media, and I did a diploma of justice first because I thought I was going to be a police officer. And then I went and did a Bachelor of Arts, Media, Marketing and Culture. And then I ended up doing marketing and culture. And then I had a car crash, and then I changed careers, and I was an endurance athlete for a while, running marathons and Ironmans, and then I was a lifeguard. And now I'm, a head of mission in aid worker in humanitarian crises. And whatever the next step is, I have no idea. But the thing is that you just kind of do it each day as it comes, because the big picture is irrelevant. It's more that you just start learning, you just start engaging. And I honestly did a diploma of justice because it felt like in the Sunday paper, they have like the TAFE catalogues that fall out. And I literally just flicked through the TAFE catalogue and was like, what am I going to do after school? And anyway, I flicked through it, and I just pointed to a page, and I looked at it, and it was like justice of the peace, justice administration, something else starting with J. And I went, oh, justice administration. And I looked at it and I went, oh, I could do that. And I did it. And I can tell you now, I needed, the universe had a bigger picture for me. And I had to trust my gut about the universe providing a bigger picture for me, because that justice, a diploma of justice, taught me how to read the law, taught me what all the big words were, taught me how to get out of dodgy parking fines, taught me how to read international law, taught me how to read maritime law, and taught me basically what I need to do as a human on the ground in a humanitarian crisis, not to get myself arrested. So then I did a diploma. I did a Bachelor of Arts in Marketing and Culture and Media. And so when I went to Lesbos, and I had the mother that tried me hand me the baby, basically that story went viral. And so I was the front cover of CNN worldwide. I was the BBC, ABC, NBC, 100,000 Google results. I had my phone in meltdown. I had, 4,000 emails from media. I had, you just Google it. It comes up everywhere. And I realized from that stage, I never got my life back. But the thing was that when the media came for me, I had my diploma of justice that I learnt all the legalities of what the area of operation I need to be as. I then had a media degree that I knew how to speak to the media, and I knew when the media was coming for me, exactly what I'm there for and what my message was. And my message has always been, it's not the Simon Lewis story, it's their story told by Simon Lewis. I'm the narrator of their story because I'm not a refugee. I'm not the one trying to sort my life out and go to freedom. I haven't been raped, abused, and tortured. I've had a privileged life in Australia that has been a wonderful gift that we all got so lucky. Like, to be born in Australia, to be, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and tall and somewhat thin, and the ability to use both legs, my mind and my arms. It's just a wonderful, lucky gift. And the only thing that's going to ruin that is probably myself. being a male, going out and being a boy. But
there's one big thing that I get out of a lot of that, and it's a common thing that when I'm talking to friends and and a lot of my background's in music, so it's a very, the action, the operation of what we do is very different as far as the impact. It's on a different level, but it's we do it for the love of it, but we often look at lofty goals and dreams of where we would like to be, or we see contemporaries or someone succeeding and we think there's just no way of getting there, or how the hell could you ever get to that level of technical skill or expertise, or just something completely left field that you see in your life walking along, and you sort of think, well, there's no way of that's completely out of my realm. It's not in my inner circle. It's not in my path or stereotypical path. And from what you just explained earlier about the gradual sort of steps along the way of just each little thing, and even though it might be sending you off on a different tangent or a different direction, and then you pivot and you change and you have a new chapter in your life, it all adds up and it all becomes value, and it can be applied later on.
Well, what we call it a body of knowledge. So you build up this body of knowledge that, I don't think anyone really remembers their first semester of uni. I don't think anyone has retained any information about what they all the papers they'd spent hours upon hours writing. If at the end of that 3-year degree, if you remember that paper, I'll be surprised. Yeah. But surprisingly, when you actually are in a crisis, or when you are drawing information from the back of your brain, you're like, oh, actually, mate, I got a bit of, I know that. And so that was the most interesting thing, is that when I was actually on the ground on Lesbos, I was like, oh, I can actually read this. I understand what the legal framework is. I understand I actually know. And then I had to teach others who had no idea, because they started using, big words like, jurisprudence and all these other, like, I can't remember any legal words right now, but there are lots of technical legal words. And basically it was trying to make it so complicated, when actually, if you had a bit of knowledge, it'd be very simple. And the simple thing is that you cannot rescue any boat until that boat has stopped and it is taking on water and sinking. If the engine's running, that boat is deemed to be still in operation. Therefore, if you rescue someone, you're dragging that person across an international border, and you can be up for prosecution. And so what we did see eventually was these 3 lifeguards from PromAid, a Spanish NGO, that helped a boat across the Aegean Sea that had its motor, and it was a very complex mess. But then the Greek authorities arrested these lifeguards and said they were people smuggling, when they weren't. But they ended up getting acquitted after 3 years of limbo. And this legal case was about how they interpreted the law. And when we go to humanitarian crises, it's that kind of thing of what is bringing you there. And for me, what actually brought me there was that image, and me simply saying I can help just a human. I had some set of skills that when I looked at that image, I did some CSI on his kind of image. I could work out how the tide was, what the weight of his skull would have been, how his body ended up the way it was. And I looked at that and I realized how bad the currents were. And actually, when I went and I was in the middle and I saw where the Alan Kurdi drowned, I realized how violent and how well, not very nice it would have been.
Absolutely.
But his mother and his brother died as well. But not many people know that, because they just focus on that image of the kid washed in the beach.
And I mean, and then the big thing with this and the connection to it all is, that's one story in multiple stories that are out there that are continuously happening. And I think That's the challenge that's out there, is that, you know, your average person that's living in a degree of comfort at home and trying to understand and connect, is that they see one thing and it's tragic, and yes, that might stir some emotions, and it will get some people into action, but others, they forget about it when the next story comes up, and forgetting that this is just an ongoing thing that continues to happen.
Well, I think it was for me that I was able to just instantly know that I had something to contribute. And like many people, I have a Facebook on my phone. I have, you know, Instagram. I have Twitter. I have all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I like the other day when we raised all that money for the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. You know, that's yesterday's news. Like, you know, we're already drowned it out by Trump now. So, you know, but the reality is that $800,000 for the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, you know, Con will put that into programs that are going to have a massive difference for, you know, years. But it's, you know, yesterday's news. And the thing was that absolutely made me act was I just looked and I said, I knew, and I said, well, why am I not? And when I give keynote speeches, you know, I talk about how I had no real money. I had okay job. I had no real idea what refugees or the Syrian refugee crisis was, apart from them getting bombed. I had no idea of how I'm going to go to Lesbos, or who am I going to go to Lesbos with. I just said, I'm going. And it was that fundamental change in my brain that made me kind of put it together. And you'd be surprised at who in your social network, who in your friendship group, kind of who's there for you. And many years ago, when I had a car crash, I was in hospital for a couple of weeks, and I got to learn who my true friends were and who I truly was as a person. And boy, oh boy, who I was as a person and who my true friends were very vastly different when I left hospital. And, you know, people who I'd known and I'd partied and gone out on, you know, Friday nights and Saturday nights, you know, didn't come and see me in hospital. And yet people and business people came and saw me who were from Sydney. You know, so it was that I had that moment of knowing myself and knowing who my network around me was. And then, you know, I weeded out all the negative people. And that clearing out of all the negative people around me allowed me to get some clarity. And so when I came to this, I'm going to Lesbos, you know, there's resistance. You know, there was kind of like, oh, why are you going to help terrorists? You know, there was all this kind of stuff. And I just cleared those people out. And I put the blinkers on. You know, it's like a racehorse, you know. Racehorse puts the blinkers on so it can just see the finish line. And I put the blinkers on and I got it done. And when you get on that wave, when you ride that kind of momentum with you know, you've got a goal and you're pushing and you're going to achieve it, you know, you're spending hours trying to get there. And when you get there, the people who have supported you, you know, it's the biggest reward to actually see someone achieving a goal and absolutely making a difference. And, you know, even though they didn't have the skills to come with me, they saw me on the ground, and that was the biggest reward. And, you know, when we had the GoFundMe campaign and we got, you know, $22,000, the thing was that I had no idea who these people were. I knew a couple of people, but I had no idea. It was just the general public of Australia, and and from other countries as well, but mainly the general public of Australia. And they, you know, the Greek community rallied around, the Lesbos community rallied around, and they helped me get on the ground. And then when I was on the ground, I had $22,000 to go, what am I going to do? And I was like, oh, I'll buy medical equipment. And then there's a shipping container full of medical equipment. So I'm like, oh, how am I going to spend this money? I have to spend this money. It's their money. What am I going to do? How is Australia, through me, going to make a difference for refugees? And then I started looking, and the thing was that when I paused and I had a good look at what was actually happening, I realized that it was taking us about 10 minutes from the time we saw a refugee boat to getting in the inflatable boats and rushing out to them to be on the scene to make a medical assessment. So we've got radios where when we get to a boat that's doing the crossing between Turkey and Lesbos, it's about 2 hours for them. An hour to get to the border, then an hour to go to the shore, to Lesbos. And they're going about, plodding along, a couple of Ks an hour. And the boats are overladen. It's got 80 people on a boat that's built for 30. And so I started looking at that, and I started going, well, why are we not getting on the scene fast? Or if the boat starts sinking, how do we not get there? And then I thought in the back of my head, in Western Australia, they have a Wesfarmers rapid response team, which has jet skis and has can rescue them very fast. And so then I looked at it, and then I said to the Greek lifeguards who were there with lifeguard Telleth, I said to them, why don't we set up a rapid response team? And we got one of their jet skis fixed. We bought another jet ski. We got a shipped in from Athens, and we set up a rapid response team. So that time of launching from 10 minutes got down to 3.
Wow.
Now it takes 30 seconds to drown in a pool. In the Aegean Sea, you're looking around 18 seconds. So you're around 18 seconds. Once you start going, you're going. And these people, they hadn't really seen water. They hadn't, they're landlocked. And, they haven't been really on a boat, but, they don't know if they're wearing real life jackets or fake life jackets that the smugglers have made them buy, because it's all, they've all paid their way, or they're getting trafficked. So, when we reduced that time and we set up this rapid response team, that was a game changer. And that game changer, end up getting nominated for many awards for it. But that's not why I did it. But the game changer was that we reduced that launch time to be on scene to make assessments. So when we make an assessment, we're like, there's 30 women and children. We need more women doctors to be on the beach when we're there. We need, we've got a critically ill person. We need, a more of an advanced medical crew. Or everyone's fine. We need to organise the buses to come to take them to the refugee camp. So, we're doing that before they actually land on the beach in Lesbos. We're doing that pre-assessment. And if anyone drowns, we're rapidly saving their life. So it was a game changer. But that was what, through the journey I had to go through, that the public, when they gave me that money, allowed us to make this difference. And that jet ski team, it was kind of a bit of an FU to any refugee policy, because it was going out rescuing refugees. And it was an Australian-funded group that went out and went and saved lives, even though that most people that were using it were Greek or the international lifeguards. It was still our contribution to one of the biggest humanitarian crises of our generation.
It's a big statement to make, isn't it?
It's amazing that, when I've lived these things and then people tell me about the stuff that I've done and the labels that come with it, it's like I just look at it and I go, well, I help people. When it's like, you are on the deadliest migration route in the world, I know, I've seen, there are people that die, there's been many deaths, and, it's like all these labels and all these branding, it contextualizes what it actually is. I've seen women and children be crammed like sardines on a boat, sitting off the middle of nowhere, just hoping for freedom. and to even have the balls to get on a boat and pretend to go to New Zealand,
yeah. No way.
Yeah. You just cannot imagine that what the mental state of these people are. The anguish and the resilience and the fear. Now, like I've every now and then, a smell. I'll get up. I'll smell something that's similar to the smells that I've smelt over there. And when you witness people who are distraught, fear has a certain smell. Like you can, when people are genuinely fearful, it's this electricity, it's this smell, this undescribable kind of event that these people have around them. And when you smell this fear, then you smell this, then when they are free, when we rescue them, or when we let them know that their life is now changed, you just see it fade away, and their hyper vigilance turns into calm, and it's just a really, really defining moment that you've just seen that someone's life has forever changed.
I mean, I went and did a little bit of prodding around and had a look at some of the articles that you've been featured in over the last few years, and it talks a lot about the number of people that you've helped save, and there's some incredible numbers of people that you've had a direct impact in assisting to make sure that they survive. But I mean, a lot of the stuff that probably doesn't get mentioned is the tragedies as well along the way. And it goes back to what we were talking about before about, you having some personal resilience to be able to manage that. But I'm assuming that those moments where that relief comes over somebody, where they realize that they're safe and they're out of that immediate danger, helps you process some of those other tragedies that you've unfortunately got to deal with, as well as just being part of the task at hand.
Well, the psychological aspects of it is that, you only can help so many people, and it's a numbers game. On one of my last missions, we were in a storm. We had 5-meter waves. We were making a beeline to Zarzas, Tunisia, for safe harbor, because our ship, we're on the limit of what we can really do, and so we needed to go to safe harbor. And as we're going to safe harbor, we get a phone call from the Italian Coast Guard to say there's a refugee boat in distress. And as head of mission, it's my job to decide exactly what we're going to do. And I have the final say. The captain and I have a discussion, and ultimately I'm responsible for the lives of my crew, my ship. And the sad reality is that it's priority number 1 is me, priority number 2 is my boat, and priority number 3 is the victim. If I put myself out, I put my boat out, no one gets rescued. And it's just the numbers game. And sadly, these people, they were off the coast of Libya in 5 to 7 meter waves. And I had to say, no, we cannot rescue them. And that's it. It's too bad, so sad. They ended up getting rescued by a Navy ship out of the middle of nowhere that was on no one's radar. That's some kind of stealth ship somewhere that magically popped up and rescued them, which was a sheer miracle. But I had to make that decision. One of the hardest.
I was just going to say, is that come with a? I'm just trying to think of a way to sort of visually describe this. But is it sort of almost like a mechanical or robotic switching of the brain, where you have to turn into this very black and white approach about, as you mentioned before, you've got priorities, you've got to look after yourself, your vessel, your crew, your equipment, and the people at hand, which is the whole reason you're there, has to sit back in that priority list because you have to get everything else right. So is it a black and white approach in those situations?
It's crystal clear. It's, for us as lifesavers, for us as lifeguards, for us as humanitarian workers, we know what we're putting ourselves into. We know the risks. We know that we can't help everyone. We know that we're educated people. We know that this is the reality of the situation. This is the reality of the crisis. But when you're confronted with it and you're saying no, it's like ripping off the Band-Aid. It stings. It does sting a little bit. And, it does break your heart. You know, you then start. It's like a suicide. You know, you try to find that. You know, even if you read the suicide note, you're still asking why. Why did they actually? You know, you never get that. You're never gonna get that answer to why. You know, because it's absolute. And that's the thing. You know, when you're having to make these decisions, it is black and white, because you do have a matrix of, you do have a risk assessment. You do have a matrix of, you know, what we're going to do. Should I endanger my life of my crew? And the reality is it's just a numbers game. And you don't know these people personally. You know, you never really know the people you rescue personally. But, you know, the odds are very, very high that you'd never know the person. But that's that kind of thing. It's just a sheer kind of matrix that you go through, and you have to be that machine in a way, because, you know, people die one day and you rescue 1,000 people the next. It's just what a crisis is about, and that's why it's a crisis.
And I guess that's the professional edge and your expertise over the years of building up that experience of going through so many different scenarios to get you in the situation that you're in now.
Well, there's critical incident stress across all emergency services. You know, it's there. You know, even Ambulance Victoria. You know, there's a high suicide rate. There's, you know, a lot of critical incident stress, and there's a lot of debriefing, and there's a lot of management of, you know, PTSD and trauma and that kind of stuff. And, you know, when you work in this space, you're going to see abnormal. You know, our normal is abnormal, but that's the reason why we do it, because it's abnormal, and we have the ability to be normal in abnormal. And, you know, it's a very, very simple set of circumstances that you make these assessments on, because it's all about numbers. It's all about helping the most you can. And then if it all goes wrong, giving dignity, you know, humanity in life and dignity in death. And, you know, the sad thing is that, you know, a body's a body. You know, we all bleed the same blood. We all, no matter when you're dead, you know, you don't speak. You don't have any religious beliefs. You're simply a body. And it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, if you're Christian, if you're a Jew, or whatever you are. When you're dead, you know, and you're dead in a crisis, you know, most of the time the aid workers will give you dignity, and that's simply it. You know, it's a part of the game that you play with, you know, trying to help one hand on this side, trying to be the other person on that side. But it's just a difficult environment, but that's the environment that, you know, you're there to help. And I'll give you an example. You know, it's when people look at their own death, you know, people, you know, forget that we're all dying.
Yep.
You know, it's like, you know, every breath you take, you know, every birthday, you're slowly getting towards your death. But, you know, are you making the most of each day, etc.? But the thing is that, you know, people don't actually imagine their death, or people don't actually, you know, write out what they want at a young age. You know, I'm lucky that I had to write out, you know, in the event of my death, what do I want with my body? You know, if I'm in Libya, or if I'm in London, you know, it's like $30,000 to repatriate my body. Wow. Do I really want my family to pay that?
Yeah.
You know, or you die in Phuket, or you die in there. You know, it's very expensive to get your body back to Australia. But it's like, what do I really want? You know, do I want my family to be happy, or do I want to come back home? And it's, you know, when you look at your own death, you really kind of learn more about yourself, because, you know, I know the funeral songs that I want. You know, I want Nick Cave, Into My Arms, and Nick Cave, The Ship Song. You know, I like those songs. You know, as a musician, you'd probably know those very well. And I'd love Nick Cave to play it, but I don't see that happening. You know, and but it's that kind of thing. It's like when you actually think about your own death, and when you think about your own life, you know, your funeral is actually for the living to grieve over you because you're dead. So
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But when these refugees are going off Libya, for example, and it all goes sadly wrong, they drowned, and sadly, the Mediterranean Sea and the Aegean Sea, and that has been a graveyard for many. 5,000 people died last year on the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Libya, and a lot of their bodies wash up in Tunisia. And there's a guy in Tunisia called Shamsuddin, and he looks after a lot of the bodies. But trying to give dignity and trying to give respect in death, and in seeing death, for example, he told us something very interesting, and it was that when a lot of the bodies have been in the water for a long time before they reach land, their heads fall off. And we were like, really? And he says, yeah, a lot of the bodies that wash up are headless. And it's because when you're in the sea, your neck muscle, after you've died, your neck muscles give out, and eventually the weight of your skull becomes heavy, and your head falls off. And yet he still has no real money, and yet he has built a refugee graveyard that he gives dignity to these people. And that's him just using his skills like I used mine to go rescue people, but he's giving dignity in death. And, in Australia, if 100 people washed up on St Kilda Beach or on Bondi Beach, you just, you couldn't imagine the story that it was. But in Tunisia, it's, not even front page news anywhere in the world. Maybe a trickle in that news feed.
I'll tell you, certainly. I mean, for you to have all these experiences where many of us would never even come close to having those types of connections and learning these stories. And I guess that's one of the things why I love doing this type of stuff with podcasts. You get to talk to people and learn and experience through other people different stories and different experiences. But for you personally, being making that decision to go, I want to go over there and help, and then going through that process of making all those decisions. I mean, you've had all these experiences that no doubt your overall perspective on life and the value that you put in it and the value that put in others is just continuously just evolving and growing and getting bigger each time you meet somebody in your travels.
Yeah, but it's like any overseas trip that you do. Where you're on a holiday, you smash a couple of those tequilas, and then you got some Mexican friends, and then you got a Mexican hat riding a donkey. It's whatever. It's like that Jim Carrey movie where he says yes.
Oh, yeah.
He's a yes man, and the thing is that you can go out on the town for $5. If you really want to, you can go out tonight, you can go see a band, and you can spend $5. Or you can spend 500, 5,000, or 50. It's about the experience. And, when I said yes, or when I said I'm going to go rescue refugees from that image of Alan Kurdi, I didn't think I knew I was going to go to Lesbos. I didn't know I was going to go to Libya. I didn't know I was going to go to Malta. I didn't know I was going to go to Catania in Sicily. I didn't know I was going to then go to Mexico. It just was that fundamental change in my heart when I said, I'm going to go help people. And whatever happens, whatever the flow, whatever has come of it. And the reason why I'm talking today is because, everyone can be inspired to make a difference. Everyone can absolutely walk out their door and change someone's life. And you know how many old people that are in your neighborhood that are sitting alone and have no friends, or their friends have died and they're desperate to just even have a conversation? You don't, because you don't talk to anyone because you're stuck on your phone. So,
Caught me out.
but that's that thing.
Yeah.
It's you don't have to be the lifesaver to save a life. You don't have to be, the hero of the story. inspire someone else or champion someone else. It's like your band, for example. The people that would have to have given you that criticism, given you that oh, you're shit, or oh, you're great, along the way, to manifest that sound, to when you then get on stage, all the money and all the time and effort to get you to that point, to then play to others and let them experience, and everyone will take away everything differently. And that's just life. That's just humanity. And that's just, when we've all got our own little stories, it isn't the Simon Lewis story. It's just their story told by me, and I'm the narrator that has had the experience to share their story.
I think, well, geez, I mean, I've got food for thought coming off the end of this conversation, because, there's a lot of stuff that, people look at lofty things that people have achieved and just think that they're so disconnected from it all, and they sit back and it becomes a bit of a commentary sort of position in life. And I think just what you said there sort of brings people back to earth, and you realize that there's very simple things that we can do or pay attention to that can make a lot of difference. And it doesn't have to be in extreme circumstances, or it could lead you into an extreme circumstance down the track, but to begin with, it's very, very simple. It's a simple concept.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'm at MSAC, and every morning I see Olympic gold medalist Mac Horton, and I see him swimming every morning, and I see him swimming every afternoon. And he does 2 sessions a day, and he puts in thousands of kilometers. And then I see a guy next to him called Jack Gerard, and Jack Gerard is helping Mac, and they're swimming together, and they're both, going for the same kind of goals. And yet Jack, I think he missed out on the Australian team by, a couple of seconds. Absolutely heartbroken and shattering kind of experience. But his resilience got him back in the water. And now he's training with an Olympic champion, going to try and get the same goals. But the thing is that the amount of time and energy and effort to put in and to try and aim for something better, even if he missed out by a couple of seconds, he still gave it 100%, and he still put in all those hours. And that's the thing that, we're all breathing. We all got the ability to do something. And, the purpose of life isn't a function. It's not a function to an organization. It's not a function to a relationship, a job, or whatever. It's an experience. And the thing is that we all just talk about our experiences. We never talk about, I went to work and I, did a 50 staples. It's, I went to work and I got to learn something. I met someone and we went out with our friend and we got drunk and now we're best mates. And the thing is that in Australia, for example, you can't be friends with someone unless you have some drunken experience. Your best mates come from drunken experiences.
Yeah.
You remember that time I pushed you down the till in a shopping trolley while we were running away from the police? And it's the crazier it is, the better the friendship.
I mean, look, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of good things that people can take out of this, and I'm certainly sort of learning. You sort of just either validate or things become a little bit clearer when you get to sort of listen to another perspective, but it sort of reinforces a lot of things that you should be doing or things that you should be thinking about, or just very simple actions that you take on a day-to-day basis. And it's good to hear you express it in that way, but then draw those parallels, with your own life and your own experiences, and generalizing it in a way that people can take something really powerful from what you're doing and apply it into their own lives in their own unique way. So it's really good.
I'm not a guru. I don't have all the answers, and I certainly have no idea what I'm doing in the future to give some crystal clear path or say that, you should do these steps. There is no way to move forward in a circuit, like a set of rules. You have to get the degree to get the job, to get the thing, like you have to get an OP1, or you have to get a high school exam, and that means your life is gonna be this way, and you're gonna go to uni. Like my mother went to uni at age 50. She got her degree at over 50 years old. And I did mine in my 20s. And you know, same outcome, different ages, different set of experiences, but same outcome.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I didn't follow no path, and you don't need to follow any path. You know, if you're an individual, you're listening to this podcast, or you know, you're trying to work out what my story is or what your story is. That's the perfect thing. Is that you're trying to work it out. You know, you don't need the front cover and the conclusion. You just need to start putting things down on the page and just start ticking off goals and just start making small things. You know, picking up one bit of garbage every time you walk out the door. You know, something so simple, but over time it makes a difference.
Absolutely,
You know?
Absolutely, and it just reinforces the simplicity of, like, people get very overwhelmed when they hear about these dramatic tales and stories of what people have been able to achieve, and then they sort of put themselves in their own sort of context and go, well, yeah, I'll never be anything like that. I'm not that. I'm not cut from the same sort of the same, you know, bread or whatever it might be, and it can be really hard for people. But that simplicity of just working out that you're unique and your own story's your own, and you know, it's a day by day thing, and it's small actions that lead to bigger things later on down the track. And there's no rush as well. I think people sort of, especially now, I think sometimes it gets worse with the instantaneous access to everything and gratification, you know, the gratification of getting attention from others as well. I've certainly been sucked into that over the years, and you sort of, you
absolutely.
realize that it's a long game, and it's a lifetime, and you've got to build day by day and be the best person that you want to.
Yeah, that's true. But you know, like I want that short-term goal of winning that $1 million lottery, but it's not going to happen. But the thing is that when whatever it is that you're meant to be doing, or whatever it is that you know that you want to do, when that light bulb moment happens, it just happens, and you will be surprised at how fast and how everything comes together. When you really know who you are, when you find out who you are and you know who you want to be or what you want to achieve, you'll be surprised at just how it all comes together. If you want to be singing in the opera house, then you will Google and you'll find a way, and you'll sneak in, and then you'll sing in the opera house, or you'll find a way. And that's the thing about the refugees, and that's the thing about these people. They're finding a way to freedom. You know, they've been through tyranny, they've been through getting bombed, they've been through hardship, they've been through, you know, economics and all the other kind, you know, whether it's an economic refugee or war refugee or any of these things. You know, they're just labels. It's just a human who has been through something, trying to achieve a better place. And that's the reality of what we're all doing. But some of us have just been born in the right place at the right time, in the right set of circumstances, and others haven't.
For anybody that's listening and they're getting a little bit sort of energized from listening to your story and your experiences along the way, what's the best thing that, if people wanted to have some kind of impact, and not just a day-to-day sort of simplistic sort of approach, but, you know, what sort of resources should people be looking into? I mean, obviously, like, missions, one of those resources, but what sort of things do you recommend people sort of inquire and look into, or if there's sort of particular resources to donate to or anything like that, what would you recommend?
Personally, it's like Nike. Just do it. Just once, but you know, just you will know what you want to do. You will know how you want to do it, and you will know the stubbornness at which you don't want to do something. So, you know, whether it is using your skills for a certain thing, or for me, you know, I did a bronze medallion, then I did an advanced resus, and I did all these kinds of courses. And ultimately, what it came down to was a decision. So you can look at your TED Talks, you can donate to, you know, UNHCR, you can donate to Proactiva Open Arms, Mission Lifeline, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, all these humanitarian organizations that are going out and doing these things. Or you can start your own. And that's the thing. You don't need to follow anyone's rules. You can be the rebel, and you can be the market disruptor. And how Red Bull. Look at Red Bull. It got we'd been drinking coffee for years, and then this is the alternative to coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Well, we've all got that alternative to something, and you can do it in your own backyard. You can do it in your own suburb. You don't need money. You don't need to have, it's, you don't know what the gap is in the market, or you don't know what the gap is in your community, because, most people don't ask the questions. And, you can look at many resources. You can Google to ever. We've all Googled when we're sick. We've all done Google Doctor, and we've all got,
Yeah.
we're all dying of all this. Or we could just go to the doctor and say, look, this is what my symptoms are, and use that expert opinions. So you can use your professional resources. There's lots of professional places out there that help you along your way, whether it is, Surf Lifesaving for me, Australia, or Lifesaving Victoria, that can answer my questions about how do I be a lifesaver or how do I be a lifeguard. But ultimately, you're going to find the solution in yourself, and you can inspire yourself, but ultimately there is no one who will, give you that magic solution, because that magic solution comes from you doing it, comes from you exploring what the pros and cons are.
Oh, well, I know what I'm doing for the rest of the afternoon. I'm just going to sit there and just think, think and reflect on this. But I mean, there's a lot of great things that you've spoken about, and there's a lot of stuff that you sort of and it's when you talk to other people and you get to hear it, and it sort of just validates a lot of stuff, and it just brings an extra element of clarity to what we should be doing, or what listening to ourselves and focusing on ourselves sometimes, and just doing the right thing by us, and then in turn for others.
But it's that kind of thing. It's like when you're doing your music, when you're sitting there in the studio and you're pumping down the bass and the drums, and you're putting it all together, and you're making a song. Then you get this body of work, and you get this body of knowledge that is this beat, this when to sing, what my words are going to be. And you have no idea if it's going to be a hit or not. You have no idea if the crowd's going to love it or not. And then you got to let it go, and you got to put it out there to the universe, and then you get the feedback. And it's, that's a hit, or that's pretty bad.
And then you just keep going with whatever that feedback is. You use it, and you keep going forward. And
that's simply it. Whether it is helping people humanitarian crises or anywhere else. It's all simple. It's all simple stuff.
That's it.
It really is.
I always say sometimes it's common sense, but it's not always commonly practiced. And but I think just because we overcomplicate things very often, so we lose the simplicity of things.
There's a saying: a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And when people who Google stuff and they become so-called experts, it can be very dangerous.
Oh yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to put a bunch of links on the website in the show notes for this episode, and I'll talk to you after this, and if there's anything specific that you would like people to sort of dive into and have a bit more of a look into to get a bit more of an understanding of the the causes that you're behind and the work that you do, then I'll certainly highlight a lot of that. But Simon, thank you.
Look, no drama. Look, my social tags are Simon Lewis AUS for Australia. So they can add me, or research. Whatever you guys want to do. It's been wonderful to talk to you and share just a glimpse at what I've done with myself. But I look forward to getting feedback and seeing what others are going to do with themselves, and all of us making a difference. That can be a better place.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, man. Thank you. If you want to reach out to Simon or any guest that's been on the Andy Social podcast today, you can click on the show notes over at andysocial.net. I will put all the resources and links from this chat in the show notes over at andysocial.net, so it's nice and easy for you all to learn more. A massive thank you to Simon, not only for being a part of the podcast, but just for the work that you do. This is literally hero work, and it's amazing to see somebody put their life on the line for others. And, at the very least, I could say without really sort of knowing the right words, congratulations, well done. And thank you for just being an incredible human being and getting out there and doing incredible things for other human beings as well. We're all the same, and it's amazing that you're able to get out there and do so much for others. So thank you very much. Now, before we wrap it up, as always, if you want to support this podcast, you can do so in a whole range of different ways. You can do a bit of social media love, tagging, retweeting, love hearting, commenting, sharing, all that sort of stuff. It all helps with the algorithms. You can buy some merchandise or shout me a beer via andysocial.net. You can please give me some guest suggestions. So tweet me something, send me a DM, or contact page or whatever it might be. Give me some suggestions of people that should be on the podcast. Reviews on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Stitcher, anywhere on the internet that accepts reviews for podcasts. Just do it. It means a hell of a lot. And just messages of encouragement are incredible as well. So whatever it is, I mean, the fact that you're listening now means more than enough and means so much to me. So thank you very much. Enough waffling from me. Another great episode in the bag. And until next week, folks, take care. We'll speak soon. Ta-ta.